Welcome to episode 35 of Accessible Finance, where we demystify personal financial topics and answer your questions so you leave saying, I get it now. I'm Eric John.
And I'm Rachel John.
Let's dive in.
All right, Eric. So I came across some concerning statistics regarding retirement.
Okay.
We've been talking with various people about that a lot now. So I wanted to share some of them with you, get your thoughts, and then kind of have a discussion about what considerations you should have about retirement and knowing, when you can retire.
Fantastic. I'm excited. Let's go.
Okay. So the average age of retirement that was reported this past year is 65 for men, 62 for women.
Got it. Great.
This is up from 57 in
calculator.
1991,
Okay.
right?
Retiring later. Okay.
In addition to that, the current U.S. life expectancy is now 79 years.
Okay.
It was 68 in 1950.
Interesting.
So people are living a lot longer.
Retiring later.
Correct.
I wonder if that has to do with not getting pensions from employers, and now it's 401k and self-funded.
Sure.
I wonder. All right, let's go.
But
what else you
the
got?
longer life expectancy results in needing to save more for retirement. And so some of those rule of thumbs that have been passed down from generation to generation just simply don't apply any longer.
Got it.
Almost half of Americans, so 46%, between the ages of 60 to 75, now report that they plan to work at least part-time during retirement because they do not believe themselves to be in a position to retire.
Interesting.
And then regarding saving statistics, Americans in 22 reported saving an average of about $5,000 for retirement. So
Okay.
for that year.
Wait, sit one more time. Americans are saving $5,000 a year for retirement?
In 2022, Americans reported saving an average of $5,000 that year for retirement.
Do we know if that's per household or individual?
It says Americans. My thought would be that it was per individual because it's specifying
Singular
by
per household.
humans. Well, or 5.
Okay.
And then 32% of working age Americans reported they have zero retirement.
That is unfortunate.
Bringing down that
third
average.
of Americans have nothing.
Correct. And then it states that on average, Americans now believe they'll need about $1.8 million to retire, and 38% of Americans believe that they will never be able to reach that goal.
Let's start there. Okay. There is not a nominal amount that will fit everyone. What I mean by that is there is no one size fits all. Once you get $1 million, you can retire.
Right.
Yay. That is not how this works.
And
if you take nothing else away from today's episode, please understand there is no number that is there. You might have a number that might, ballpark be relevant to you, but there is no number for everyone in the audience that would apply to everyone equally.
So if we spend $5,000 a month in our expenses, and then our neighbor across the way spends $20,000 a month, we wouldn't need the same amount to retire.
Not even close. So just some real quick, we picked 3 numbers. If you spend $5,000 a month after tax, or $60,000 a year. Okay. We've done this before in episodes. We're going to take that annual after-tax spending, and then we're going to divide it by, call it the 4% rule. We'll use the 4% rule here. So we'll divide it by 4% or 0.04.
Can you just quickly
the 4% rule is a result of a study that was done empirically over market returns, and about 95% of the time, you will win, or with a 60-40 portfolio, 60 being stocks and 40 being fixed income or bonds. With a 60-40 portfolio over a 30-year time horizon in retirement, if you withdrew 4% of the portfolio every year, you're good to go. Right? I mean, I'm sorry, if you take 4% of the portfolio, the beginning portfolio, and then adjust it for inflation and take that number every year, you're all set.
Yeah.
Okay. You win a vast majority of the time.
Okay.
So typically that's cited as like, if you're retiring, you can take 4% of your portfolio in the beginning.
And so you just said that we can't use a rule of thumb numerically, but since this is percentage based, it's more applicable across populations.
Well, correct. We're really just trying to get you to the lump sum.
Correct.
So we're not
correct. We're reverse
engineering what you would need to take 4% of that and fund your needs, your spending needs.
Okay.
Okay.
So hypothetical one, you spend $5,000 a month.
$5,000 after tax.
Right.
$60,000 a year. You divide that by 0.04 and you get 1.5 million. So what that says to us really is you need 1.5 million lump sum in retirement funds, and then this needs to be after tax.
Right.
So if you have a Well, I don't. Okay, so
It's
we're
your
gonna
money
get
till
that
you can
granular.
book it. Yeah.
Yes, but if you have this all in a 401k, for example, when you pull that money out, so if I have 1.5 million in a 401k, that is not worth the same amount of
Right.
dollars as 1.5 million in a Roth IRA, for example, or even 1.5 million in a brokerage account, for example. Because in a brokerage, even if my basis is, I don't, even if my basis is zero, I'm still paying a lower rate because capital gains is
So I
ordinary
think
income.
that while we can't numerically specify because we don't know everybody's factors, it's
Hmm.
important to know that we're talking after tax dollars.
Correct.
So if it's in a type of account where taxes are going to be assessed on it, so anything that's really not a Roth, right?
Mhm.
Then you would have to go back in and add on top of that 1.5
What you're going to be
what
paying
the
in
taxes
taxes.
would be.
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am. Exactly correct.
Okay.
Exactly correct. So what we need is 1.5 million really per
Yeah.
5,000 we want to spend a month. Does that make sense? A little bit?
Correct.
So
So it's
so if we wanted
1.5
five,
if I spend 5.
yep,
If I spend 10,000 a month, then I would
I
need
want 3
3.
mil.
Okay.
Okay. And if you spend 15, you want 4.5. And
Okay.
if you spend the 20K that our neighbor
Right.
across the street spends, we need 6.
And that is significantly higher than what I think a number of people have heard and what we've seen a lot online,
Correct.
which is $1 million, you're good to retire. It also is important to factor in the length of time you're planning to live in that retirement window.
Absolutely.
So we are presuming a what type of
30 year.
longevity? Okay.
30 years of retirement.
Okay.
So if you're retiring at 65, we're thinking you're living until 95.
Nice. And the life expectancy currently was like 79 or something.
Correct.
So pretty safe. But I think that really speaks a lot to, we discussed this is something we're planning to do in the next podcast, but there's specific population that is focused on trying to retire early or that fire
Correct.
movement. Um,
Right, and that's we spoke about that in the past. You're right,
yeah,
briefly. We've alluded to it, and we've just used a lower figure than the 4%. So what you'll do is the longer the time horizon you might need, or the longer the years of retirement, your
right.
expected end of plan, right? The further out that is, the lower the amount we're going to want to withdraw
Correct.
immediately.
So if I'm going to retire at 40 and I'm planning to live till 90, so I need a 50-year
If
retirement,
we're retired, yeah, if we're
I'm
looking at
talking
that,
a
we're talking closer to two and a
yeah.
half percent.
And so because that is not typically the norm, we're going to be speaking more to the norm.
Correct. Today we're
That'll be
talking
separate.
65.
Yeah. Okay.
We're talking 65 ballpark.
Perfect. So
Another
4%.
point to make real quick is that when we're talking about this after-tax number that we're going to divide by 0.04, right, to come up with your lump ballpark figure that you need to have, your lump sum you need to have at the beginning, we're going to subtract out pensions and Social Security. So before our 60K is what we need after we've already accounted for Social Security. So maybe we get 20K from Social Security. Let's just assume that we get 20K, right? Then that would mean that we're spending about 80K. Does that make sense?
Got it. So if
Clarify,
we're
Rachel, help.
okay. So if like let's say that we spend 5,000 a month,
Mhm.
right? And so 60 is legitimately our expenses.
Got it.
Okay. But we actually get 10 in like Social Security, right?
Okay.
So
Now we're
our
gonna use 50.
correct. So what you would need to do is essentially figure out like it's going to have to start with your expenses, an awareness of expenses, your awareness of your cash flow
Right.
post retirement.
And
Um,
this will be big on the next podcast as well.
correct.
Everything's gonna start with cash flow. It's
It will always.
extremely it always is gonna start with cash flow
Right.
for everybody, even if you're an accumulator in your 20s, okay? You're
Correct.
building wealth in your 20s, we're still starting with your cash flow.
Correct.
Because we need to determine how much we have and what our flexibility is there.
And I think the important thing there is the fact that like there's been a significant movement, particularly with the millennial population, to move in the direction of like working to live rather than living to work and
Okay.
really wanting to maintain a similar lifestyle in retirement as they do previously. And so
Mhm.
you need to ensure that you're able to continue the cash flow situation that you have
Right.
because we don't see people typically saying, "Oh, when I retire, I want to eat less good food. Like I want to do
Right.
less fun things."
Correct, correct, correct. Yeah, you'll hear some planners talk about the go-go years, which means like if you retire and you're in your like low to mid 60s or even mid to late 60s, you can still do stuff. You can
Right.
still do international
Vacation.
travel,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right? Like you can still move around the
Right.
country, visit various areas of the country,
A lot of
international
people
travel.
want to still be able to support
You might still
like
be able to go
them.
skiing and snowboarding.
Yeah.
Probably on the end, but maybe.
You're gonna
I'm
go till
going.
you're 90.
I'm going.
Um,
We're in.
but they also a lot of people we've interacted with who are looking at that retirement phase of their life want to support doing activities with their family. So even though the
Right.
kids have moved out, and so you might be thinking to yourself, well, that's reduction in expenses. Not
Yeah,
necessarily.
is it?
I know
When
that
you treat the family to dinner every
correct,
weekend or every weekend
correct,
or two?
or pay for them to come in for family vacations
Yeah.
or whatever the case may be.
Which brings another
Um,
point. So, A, you need to have a very granular understanding
yes,
of your cash flow
right,
and what it's going to look like in retirement. So, you need to be very clear on that. Not like, I'm guessing, I think I spend about 5K a month, maybe.
correct.
No, no, no. Like, you need to know, and and preferably over at least a year. But well, I would definitely say more closer to 2 or 3.
Yeah.
We want to see longer term spending trends, right? If it's an artificially low year and you use those assumptions and then you actually retire and you're looking to never enter the workforce again, you could have made a significant mistake. Another couple points,
Yeah.
right? One, or two, I guess. I'm sorry, is that you should not um completely completely blanked. I'm sorry.
You're gonna come back to it. But I'm good. I want to just touch
Yeah,
real
yeah,
quick
hit
on
me.
we talked about the $5,000 a month expenses. So we said, okay, in our hypothetical number one, like you're spending 60,000 a month, but then we said we get 10 from Social Security, so we're backing that out for our withdrawal
Right.
rate. And the question might be why,
Hmm.
right? And so it's important, I think, to acknowledge that that Social Security payment that you're getting is supposed to maintain, like to keep up with or be inflation
Right, it's
adjusted.
gonna be inflation adjusted, that's correct.
Correct.
Sorry, the other couple points I was gonna make, one is that you might typically hear about this, like, 80% rule, or you will spend 80% of your current expenses. You take what you're spending now,
Yeah.
and then take 80% of that number, and then that's what you're gonna spend in retirement.
And that is very, very popular all over. Like if you
Yeah, it's all
search
over the
retirement
internet.
planning, it's one of the first things you're going to see come
Correct.
up.
Sometimes that's true, but like we just said,
Yeah.
sometimes it's not.
And
You
it's
might wanna take your family to dinner, you might wanna
correct.
enjoy vacation that you haven't had in a
Correct.
while, you might wanna spend time at Disney World, check out the new Harry Potter stuff at Universal.
Definitely doing that. We're planning one now, deal with it. Um, yes, I think that it's the 80% rule, I think, was based upon the very old, kind of outdated at this
Right.
point, retirement idea of like, I'm going to work until I like am kind of physically limited in doing so, which also physically limits me from doing certain other things. So in retirement, I know I'm going to spend less because I'm not doing X, Y, and Z. That's no longer what we're seeing. The trend is very much towards retiring to be able to enjoy time with your spouse or your partner, your family, doing various activities. So the expenses are not going down in the way that I think people assume that they are.
Right.
To that end,
It's just not homogenous. Like, we're not talking about one homogenous, like, person, right? Like, there are unique situations, and every
correct,
person is gonna have and every individual is gonna have a different, you know, risk tolerance, asset allocation. You'd have different
correct.
taxability of the
And I
retirement
think
fund.
that's why the 4% withdrawal rate is so much better as a proxy for a kind of universalistic rule because it's not specific to individuals.
Right.
It's relating to the market, which everyone is partaking in.
Right. The other point to make here is so the 4% rule is to get you into the ballpark
Yeah.
of what the number might need to be in the area of.
Right, right,
We're
right.
not saying
That's
if
your number.
right, we're not saying if you're 60K, if you're spending 60K a year after tax and Social Security and pension,
You need
then you
1.5.
should have exactly $1.5 million dollars. If
You're
you have
good.
1.6, that's too much. And if you have 1.4, that's too little.
Agreed.
And now when you have 1.5, listener, definitely go retire. Absolutely not saying that.
Right. But it does say if you have 700,000,
You're not
please
close.
don't.
Please don't. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't jump.
And so to that end, there are some very interesting, I think, retirement planning statistics. So there are a number of surveys that were given to people who are in their retirement years,
Okay.
asking about, their impressions as they were leading up to it. And so
Mhm.
nearly 7 in 10, so like 68% of Americans between 50 and 74 do not currently have formal retirement plan. And 4 in 5 lack retirement planning basics on how to even be financially secure. Um, which is
67% between the ages of 50 and
and
74
74.
don't have a formal retirement plan.
Yeah.
Does that mean participation in like 401k type things?
No,
Or does it just mean I don't know what I'm gonna do?
I don't have
I'm
direction.
contributing, but I'm not really sure
Correct.
why and how much I'm targeting and that
Yes.
kind of thing. Got it, got
Yeah.
it.
So it's not that they're not investing, but I think that the general public is tends to be uneducated on this because I didn't learn this in school.
Nope, nobody did.
Um,
Very few did. Very few.
right.
Some did.
Very select few, and certain people went back to school to specifically focus on that.
Sure.
Well, it wasn't even school, I guess. It was more specific training. But um, the 67% of Americans between 50 and 74 have basically been contributing to their retirement plan and assume like, okay, my boss, like my company has this, I've contributed to it.
Right.
Good. I can retire at the state retirement age
Yeah.
and I'm good to go. Everything
If
should be
everybody
taken
else
care of.
is doing it and I do it, I should be okay. And
Right.
that's a little bit
And so
dangerous,
the
to say
formal
the least.
retirement plan is more of like we were saying, I mean, even if you're going off the 80 rule, that's even more than these people have. It's an understanding of your unique circumstances and what you need to be successful to meet
Right.
your goals. Because like we said, not everyone's retirement vision is the same. Like my idea for retirement is to do a lot of things, particularly with our children. And
We have to?
yeah, you can stay here. You can be a
We're
bump.
kidding. No, I'm excited.
Um,
I mean, sure, let's
but
self-disclosure here a little bit.
we've seen, yeah,
I'm we're planning on spending even more in
yeah.
retirement because we're hoping to treat the family,
Right, the
family
kids.
barbecues. There, we hope that, well, we assume that the kids are going to have families and hope that they do.
Yeah,
So you're not just going to be feeding we have 3 kids. We're not
right.
just going to be feeding 3 kids now. We're going to be feeding 6 adults at that point,
Plus
and then potentially
potentially
the
3.
offspring.
Yeah,
So that's more costs of food and dining out and
exactly.
groceries for barbecues, right? So
Correct.
vacations for everybody if we can, if we could swing it. So the idea is that it's not always 80%. I'm planning on not being 80%. I'm looking at 120%.
Correct. But our neighbor over there that's spending 20,000 a month now, their version of retirement might just be I'm going to sit down, watch TV, and
Right.
eat some
Yeah.
popcorn.
It could be
It might be a lot cheaper for
right.
them
Right.
then.
Right. They could be
So
half.
it's important to acknowledge that your current spending patterns and your future spending patterns may
Mhm.
be different and to enumerate kind of what those differences are to try to quantify them
Yeah.
as best you can. In addition to that, 67% of retirees say they wish they had understood retirement savings
I bet they
when they
did.
were working, and
Yeah.
57% reported that they believe they waited too long to
To retire.
start saving.
Oh, yeah. No, that's
Yeah.
true. Compound interest, save in your 20s, save for your
Correct.
kids.
And then finally, 88% of people reported that they believe the generation following them is going to have an even more difficult time retiring than they did.
They're not wrong.
No, they're not.
Companies are getting better at contributing less to your plans and getting away with it.
Yes.
So there's that.
And so the planning that goes in, you don't want, there's very little you can do when you're sitting there at 74 being like,
Yeah. I mean,
okay.
that's true. That's true.
Like the runway is so short. There is no runway. You are
At
living on the
74,
runway.
you're already there.
You're on the plane.
Yeah.
So it's just the sooner that you can make the moves, the more impactful those changes become.
Right. So I guess part of what we're saying today, guys, is if you're thinking, like you can do the math with they have a bunch of time value money calculators. You can
Mhm,
get yourself a little, BA2 plus. It doesn't, we're not saying to do that. We're just saying look at the ballpark of your spending, right?
mhm.
So if I'm spending 60K a year, but I have like nothing saved for retirement, then I know that let's assume that 60K a year is going to be after Social Security. Maybe I'm spending 80 and Social Security is giving me 20. Okay.
Okay.
So let's assume that I need the 60K. All right. And I know this. I need to look at how am I going to get to 1.5 mil after tax dollars?
Mhm,
Like, what am I going to do? Should I change my 401k
mhm.
deferrals? Like, you can actually math out what you need. You can do this and find out if you're even close to on track.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Because if you're not and you don't figure this out until 10, 15, 20 years down the
Right. You
road,
will regret it. It's not one of those things where you stick your head in the sand and the situation gets better.
yeah.
It absolutely does not.
Although I will say we have a lot of people we've talked to and worked with that have a tendency to do that because it can be so
It's
terrifying,
daunting.
so
Right.
overwhelming, and it feels very
It's very stress
wishy-washy.
inducing
Yes.
and,
Yes.
high anxiety, high stress situation, right? Like
Correct.
nobody wants to deal with this stuff, but fun
And
to talk about.
um, you know,
It's
in
uncomfortable. And some of the
correct.
changes you have to make are uncomfortable, right? Like
Correct.
maybe your children really like eating out every Friday night and you have to stop that because your budget, you're not
Tightening
gonna have
in
enough
on a
for
budget
retirement.
is really, really
Yeah, it's
hard.
rough.
And the first step in doing that is just to have an awareness of where the funds are
Exactly.
going and why, and just to prioritize where you still want them. Maybe eating out is not where you're cutting back, it
Right.
might be somewhere else.
No.
Now, finally, the last bit of statistics I have that I find really interesting was the post retirement statistics.
Okay.
Um, 12% of currently retired Americans
Yeah.
are expected to come out of retirement in 2024.
Ooh, that's unfortunate for
And the
those people.
reason for that is 44% of the retirees report they struggle to afford basic living expenses.
So,
71% of retirees are carrying debt through their retirement.
wow. I
71%.
assume those are mortgages. It's not universally
Well,
bad.
we've talked about this. Not
Yeah.
all debt is
Yep.
created equal.
Nope.
So you may be reporting debt, and that's fine and dandy, but it should be something that you see coming. You don't want to
Right.
find yourself in a position where you have to
These
take it
things
on.
should all be intentional. They should be planned.
Correct.
They should be accounted for beforehand.
Correct. And half of retirees believe that they will outlive their savings. Um, so you know,
That's gotta be very disconcerting for those people.
correct, how
How would
horrifying.
yeah, how would it feel to be in retirement, wake up in the morning, you're like, "I don't know if I'm gonna make it."
Don't know if I can afford to keep lights on tonight.
It's really brutal.
Particularly if you are looking at, you know, kids, grandkids, people who have
Yeah.
to now either
That has to
jump in to
adversely
financially
impact your
support
quality of life, right? Like,
others.
your mental health, if nothing else.
Like, no one wants that to be the reality of their retirement.
Right.
And so, you
Yeah,
know,
so just look at it today, see if you're on track, you know?
correct. And that's something that you can do now. And even if you're making small changes, like if you're spending, if we're the neighbors and we're spending 20, not our neighbors don't actually do this, but I keep pointing to neighbors. Sorry. If if you're spending 20,000 a month and you realize like that's going to be tight,
Right,
you can then run the numbers the same way with 18,000 a month
right.
and just see how that small change can impact that future for you. I think just understanding how sensitive those numbers are is really, really important.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Alrighty. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review the show. And if you have any topics you would like discussed or financial problems you'd like solved, reach out to us at podcast@equilibriumfp.com or visit our website at equilibriumfp.com.
Yes. Till next time.
Thanks, guys.